You spend 60 years in the same pew, believing because it's just what you do. What happens when you stop? I'm 85. I left it all behind for a while just to see. I figured, what's he gonna do? Strike me down? The electric bill was more of a threat. What I found out there in the quiet of my own ordinary Sundays, it wasn't what I expected. It shocked me, and it might just change how you see your own path, too. The coffee percolator was louder than the church bells that first Sunday. I sat at my kitchen table, the Florida sun straining through the blinds, and listened to it, a mechanical, gurgling hymn. I put on my old fishing hat, the one with the faded bass patch, instead of my tie. The silence in the house was a physical thing, a presence where Eleanor's perfume used to be. I got in the car, a ritual in itself, but turned left toward Millie's Diner instead of right toward St. Michael's. The guilt was a low hum in my chest for about 10 minutes. Then the pancakes arrived. The syrup pooled in the butter, and I was a lost cause. I felt like a rebel in orthopedic shoes. It wasn't a crisis of faith, not in the dramatic book-throwing sense. It was a crisis of routine. Eleanor had been gone 2 years. The funeral had been at St. Michael's, of course. Father O'Malley had said all the right things about angels and eternal light, but the words bounced off me like rain on a tin roof. All I could see was the empty space in the pew next to me, a space that had been hers for 58 years. After that, church became just another room where she wasn't. The hymns we'd sung together felt like accusations. The prayers felt like monologues directed into a void. One Tuesday, staring at the calendar, I just decided I wouldn't go next Sunday. Just one Sunday, an experiment. The freedom was terrifyingly bland. I read the newspaper cover to cover. I watched the ibises stalk across my lawn. I felt untethered, a balloon cut loose but with nowhere in particular to drift. That's when I started going to the county animal shelter on Tuesdays, my old grocery day. Not from some saintly urge to serve, but because I was lonely and the silence in my house had started to echo. They put me in the kennels, cleaning bowls and filling water. That's where I met Buddy, a scruffy Jack Russell Terrier with one ear that flopped permanently. He wasn't grateful. He was indignant, barking at me with sheer, spirited annoyance until I sat with him. I didn't pray those afternoons. I just listened to his grumbles, to the distant traffic, to my own breathing. I found a strange, deep holiness in the stubborn wag of his tail when I arrived, a sacrament in the simple act of showing up. It was more real than any ritual I'd performed on autopilot. Then I began to see them, the congregation in the wild. Mrs. Henderson, who led the choir with the precision of a symphony conductor, was in a full-blown, finger-waving argument at the post office over a damaged package. Her face was flushed, her voice sharp. Deacon Jim, a pillar of solemn dignity, was at the hardware store, looking exhausted, buying a heavy-duty lock and a 6-pack of cheap beer. He saw me, offered a weary smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "Rough week, Walt." It was a revelation. Their piety was a costume they wore on Sundays, same as my tie. Underneath, they were as confused, tired, and messy as I was. The relief was profound. Their humanity didn't diminish them. It made them real to me for the first time. The biggest shock, though, wasn't what I lost, but what quietly grew in its place. A belief in things I could see and touch. A belief in Frank, my neighbor, who never misses a Wednesday bringing my garbage can up the drive without being asked. A belief in Chloe, the teenager at the library, who shows me how to use the computer to look at pictures of my grandkids, her patience endless. A belief in the stubborn, daily fact of the sunrise over the retention pond behind my house, painting the water in colors no stained glass window could match. It wasn't a grand philosophy or a new dogma. It was a quiet, persistent noticing. The world kept being kind, kept offering its small, steadfast graces, even when I wasn't checking in with headquarters. I didn't abandon my faith. I let it out of its box. I went back for Christmas Eve service this past year. The candles, the familiar carols, they were beautiful. But it felt different, like visiting an old, dear friend's house, not reporting for spiritual duty. I didn't feel judged by the empty space beside me. I felt Eleanor there, in the memory of her hand in mine during silent night. The peace I'd been searching for in hymns and sermons was waiting for me in my own backyard, in the chaotic symphony of birds at the feeder, in the warm weight of Buddy's head on my lap during our afternoon naps. I'm 85. I thought I was looking for answers. Turns out I just needed to learn how to see the questions and the quiet, astonishing beauty in the spaces between them. Ever get to a point where you wonder if you spent your whole life believing in something just because you were told to? Yeah, me too. Hey everybody, welcome back. My name's Walter. I'm 85, I live in Florida, and I taught high school history for more years than I care to count. For 60 of those years, I sat in the same pew at St. Michael's every Sunday, third from the front, left-hand side. After my wife Eleanor's funeral, that pew just felt emptier than I could stand. So one Tuesday, I decided I just wasn't going to go anymore. I figured at 85, what's God gonna do, strike me down? The electric bill was more of a threat, to be honest. But my rebellion didn't start with a grand pronouncement. It started with a very quiet, ordinary Sunday. No church bells, just the sound of my old percolator gurgling on the stove. I put on my old fishing hat, the one with the faded bass on it instead of a tie. Felt downright scandalous. Then I got in the car and drove right past St. Michael's. Ended up at Millie's Diner. I ordered pancakes. Pancakes. Like some kind of rebel without a cause. I felt guilty for about 10 minutes, staring at the syrup bottle. Then the syrup hit, and I was a lost cause. Just sat there, watching the regulars come and go, and the strangest thing was the silence in my own head. No schedule, no prayers I felt I had to mumble, just the clink of cutlery and Millie calling out an order. It was so simple. With that empty Sunday space, I had to find my own rhythm. And what I stumbled into first was surprisingly furry. So I started volunteering down at the county animal shelter on Tuesdays. Not because I felt a duty, but because I saw a picture in the paper of this little scrappy terrier named Buddy. Looked like he'd seen some things. I'd go and just sit with him in the run. Didn't pray over him, just scratched his ears. And one Tuesday, he finally wagged his tail. Just a thump, thump, thump on the concrete. And I'll tell you, I felt more holiness, I guess, in that one wag than in 100 hymns I'd mumbled through on autopilot for 60 years. I realized I was praying less, but I was listening more. To Buddy's quiet breathing, to old Mr. Petrosky next door telling me about his tomato plants. The silence had a texture to it, and it wasn't empty. Then came the real eye-opener. I started seeing the folks from St. Michael's out in the wild, as they say, and it changed everything. I was at the post office, wrestling with one of those flat-rate boxes, and I heard this voice. It was Mrs. Henderson, our choir leader for 30 years, angelic soprano, and she was having a full-blown, finger-pointing argument with the clerk over a lost package. I mean, she was fierce. Young man, I have the receipt right here. It was magnificent and human. Then, just last week, I saw Deacon Jim at the hardware store. He was in the aisle, holding two different deadbolt locks, looking so tired, just worn right out. He saw me, gave a little shrug, and said, "Grandkids are visiting. Need to lock up the good whiskey." We both laughed. It was a relief, to see the mess, the tiredness. It felt more real than all the Sunday smiles. That got me thinking about what I was actually starting to believe in. It wasn't a grand philosophy. It was Frank, my neighbor, who without fail brings my garbage can up the drive every Thursday because he knows my knees are bad. It was a kid at the library, couldn't have been more than 17, who spent 40 minutes with infinite patience showing me how to use the new computer catalog. Didn't sigh once. And it's the sunrise. I started getting up early, making a cup of tea, and just watching the sun hit the pond out back. This stubborn, simple fact of light happening every single day, whether I acknowledged it or not. The world kept being kind, kept turning, even when I wasn't checking in with the celestial headquarters. That was the shock. The realization settled over me like that morning light, slow and warm. I thought about Eleanor. She'd always found God in her garden, in the dirt under her nails. Maybe I'd just been looking in the wrong building. I drove home past St. Michael's, its spire familiar against the sky, and felt not guilt, but a quiet curiosity. What other small, sacred things had I been missing? And that was the shock, really, that the world kept being kind, kept turning, even when I wasn't checking in with the celestial headquarters. It wasn't a rejection, you see. It was more like, I've been looking at a map my whole life, and I finally stepped outside and just looked at the land. The map wasn't wrong exactly. It just wasn't the territory. I think about Eleanor a lot in all this. She passed 7 years ago last April, and for the longest time I thought my faith was what was holding me together after she was gone. That the rituals, the prayers, the pew, that was the glue. But sitting here now, with this cheap tea getting cold, I wonder if maybe the glue was just being still, letting the missing happen. The church gave me a place to do that, a structure for it. But the missing, the love, that was mine. It came from me. It came from 53 years of marriage, of her laughing at my terrible jokes, of her hands in the garden soil. No building can hold that. It's too big. Here's the thing I didn't expect to realize, the one that snuck up on me just the other morning. I was watching those birds at the pond, the herons, and I thought, I'm not afraid of dying anymore, not like I was. For years it was this background noise, the final test, the judgment, the hoping I'd done enough. Now, I look at that sunrise, or I think about Frank bringing my garbage can up, or that kid in the library, and it feels like I'm already part of something that just keeps going. My contribution isn't a perfect attendance pin. It's that I was here. I loved Eleanor. I tried to be decent. I taught a few kids about the Civil War who might still remember a fraction of it. Maybe that's the whole ledger. It's not a trade. I didn't swap out one belief for a shiny new one. I just took off a heavy coat I didn't know I was wearing. The air feels different, lighter, even with all the aches and pains an 85-year-old body collects. The peace I was looking for after Eleanor died, the peace I thought I'd find only in that quiet, empty church, I found it in my own backyard, literally. In the stubborn way the sun comes up, in the messy, complicated kindness of ordinary people who don't think they're being holy. They're just being. And maybe that's the same thing. So I didn't trade one set of rules for another. I just finally opened my eyes. The peace I was looking for wasn't in a doctrine. It was in my own backyard, watching the birds argue over the feeder. I went back to St. Michael's on Christmas Eve just to hear the carols, and it felt different. Not like reporting for duty, but like visiting an old friend you don't need to see every week to still love. The building, the hymns, they're still part of the landscape of my life. They're just not the whole map anymore. Look, I'm not telling anyone to leave their church or their faith. That's not my place. All I know is, at 85, I needed to step outside the familiar walls to finally see what was right in front of me the whole time. A world that runs on small kindnesses and stubborn sunrises. That's what I believe in now. It's quieter, but it feels true. If this little kitchen table chat meant anything to you, I'd appreciate a like. It lets me know I'm not just talking to my microwave. And I'd really love to hear from you down in the comments. Tell me, where have you found a bit of unexpected peace or kindness lately? Was it in a familiar place or someplace new? I read every single one. And if you'd like to join me for more of these conversations, hit subscribe. It means more than you know, truly. All right. Be good to each other out there.